Battle for Donbas is one of the most brutal battles in and for Europe, Zelensky says. The battle for the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine will surely go down in military history as one of the most brutal battles in Europe and for Europe, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his nightly address on Monday. This comes after Ukrainian military officials earlier in the day said their troops had been pushed back from the Severodonetsk city center, which along with its twin city Lysychansk, is at the heart of the current battle for what's still in Ukrainian control in the Luhansk region in Ukraine's eastern Donbas. Officials also said 3 key bridges linking Severodonetsk to Lysychansk are now impassable to vehicles, meaning supply routes in and evacuations out via those routes are impossible. Zelensky said Ukrainians face the significant advantage of the Russians in the amount of equipment, and especially, artillery systems. The price of this battle for us is very high. It's just scary. And we draw the attention of our partners on a daily basis to the fact that only a sufficient number of modern artillery for Ukraine will ensure our advantage and finally the end of Russian torture of the Ukrainian Donbas, he added. Zelensky said a boy was killed on Monday by Russian shelling in the battle for Lysychansk. This is it, a 6-year-old boy on Moskovska Street is also, as it turned out, a dangerous enemy for the Russian Federation, he said. All 3 bridges into Severodonetsk are now impassable, Luhansk region leader says. All 3 bridges connecting the embattled city of Severodonetsk with its twin city Lysychansk to the west, are now impassable for vehicles, severely limiting evacuation options for those trying to flee the city and supply routes in, according to Serhiy Haidai, head of the Luhansk region military administration. The bridges made it possible to carry at least some humanitarian cargo, something related to reserves. It is currently impossible to use the bridges, Haidai said. A second of 3 bridges were destroyed over the weekend. Haidai's office explained that the 3rd bridge, which has come under sustained shelling, is now impassable for vehicles. The destruction of the bridges gives the Russian military another advantage since supply lines are interrupted, Haidai said. Getting in weapons and reserves is now difficult, but not impossible, he said. Haidai said that travel between Severodonetsk and Lysychansk was still possible, but did not go into detail for security reasons. Lysychansk is already being shelled very powerfully, with a heavy caliber weapons. They are destroying everything, both humanitarian headquarters and hospitals. But from Lysychansk there is still an opportunity to evacuate people and pick up humanitarian goods every day, he said. Haidai also said of Severodonetsk that Russian forces really control most of the city, estimating about 70% to 80%. But he denied claims by the self-declared Luhansk People Republic, LPR, that Severodonetsk has fallen, saying this is not true. Part of the city is still controlled by Ukrainian defenders. If they had complete control of the city, Russian soldiers would not have died there, Haidai said. Haidai also said that even if Ukrainian forces won back the city, it would be impossible to restore the infrastructure completely before the winter. The only possible thing is to put radiators that will keep the temperature warm in the tents. And yes, everything is broken. With water, with electricity, there will be huge problems with everything. High-intensity hostilities continue in Severodonetsk, Ukrainian official says. Intense fighting continues inside Severodonetsk, one of the last holdouts for Ukraine in the Luhansk region, and more widely, the entirety of the country's eastern Donbas, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense spokesperson Oleksandr Motuzianik said in a briefing Monday. High-intensity hostilities continue in Severodonetsk, where Ukrainian troops fight to repel Russia's advances, Motuzianik said. Russian forces already in control of the city center are actively using artillery, multiple rocket systems, he added. He said that Russia's advantage is their air power, which is why they are advancing, adding that Russia is losing troops in armed combat. In terms of the street fighting happening in Severodonetsk, Russian forces are trying to encircle Ukrainian troops, but the enemy is suffering significant losses in the infantry units of the Russian Guard and the Russian armed forces. And they are advancing only by using assault aircraft, Motuzyanik said. Earlier Monday, the armed forces of Ukraine said that Russia had pushed Ukrainian forces back from the city center. Russian missiles fired on Chernihiv region prompt evacuations, Ukrainian officials say. Russian forces fired 3 missiles on Pryluki district in Ukraine's northern Chernihiv region, forcing evacuations of some residents due to the fear of fire spreading, according to officials. A still image of the aftermath showed a massive, black plume of smoke rising above the skyline. At about 1:15 p.m., the occupiers fired 3 missiles at Pryluki in the Chernihiv region, Ukraine's Operational Command North said in a statement on Facebook. Evacuations have been announced for the villages of Zayat, Petrivsk, Tyky and Sukostovets of Pryluki district. The reason for that is the threat of fire spreading, said Serhiy Boldarev, director of the Department of Civil Defense of the Chernihiv Regional State Administration, told Ukraine's public broadcaster. While there are no known casualties, the Chernihiv region has not been a regular target of Russian strikes or shelling recently. In March of this year, Chernihiv suffered great losses, specifically the city of Chernihiv, after coming under sustained Russian attack leaving scores dead. Chernihiv was then occupied by Russian forces, but they withdrew in April. Ukrainian military spokesperson derides complacency of Western donor countries. The spokesperson for the Ukrainian military's International Legion on Monday derided a sense of complacency among Ukraine's military patrons, saying that the country needed far more support if it is to defeat Russia's invasion. There's a certain sense of complacency that seems to have fallen over our Western partners that the arms deliveries that Ukraine has been already provided with are somehow enough to win the war, said Damian Magru, spokesperson for the International Legion for the Defense of Ukraine, during a press conference. They are not. They do not come near anything that would be close to enabling us to defeat the Russians on the battlefield. Magru said that Ukraine's long-range artillery capability was severely lacking. Please keep sending heavy artillery, heavy weapon systems, long-distance rockets, anti-ship rockets. All of these things are needed today on the battlefield. They also were needed yesterday. The longer we wait, the more deaths there will be. And these deaths will be not only of Ukrainian armed forces but also our legionnaires, he added. Arbitrary arrest of anti-war protesters in Russia worrying, says UN Human Rights Commissioner. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet has called the arbitrary arrest of a large number of anti-war protesters in Russia worrying. Speaking at the UN's Human Rights Council session in Geneva Monday, Bachelet added that Russia had introduced new criminal law restrictions that included general prohibitions on the dissemination of information based on vague and ambiguous notions, including false news or non-objective information. I also regret the increase in censorship and restrictions on independent media, Bachelet, a two-time former Chilean president, told the session. Bachelet had earlier told diplomats that the war in Ukraine continues to destroy the lives of many, causing havoc and destruction, and the horrors inflicted on the civilian population will leave their indelible mark, including on generations to come. It's 2 p.m. in Kyiv. Here's the latest on the war in Ukraine. Russia could encircle Severodonetsk within days and plans to completely cut off the key eastern city, according to Ukrainian military officials, who warned that Russia has pushed Ukrainian forces back from the center of the city. Here are the latest headlines on the war in Ukraine: The battle for Luhansk. The Luhansk region in eastern Ukraine is at the epicenter of the conflict, with much of the area already under Russian control. The focus of the fighting is on the twin cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Russia has pushed Ukrainian forces back from the center of Severodonetsk, the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, said Monday morning. The enemy, with the support of artillery, carried out assault operations in the city of Severodonetsk, had partial success, pushed our units away from the city center, and hostilities continue, said the AFU. Russia was seeing success due to a significant advantage in artillery, said Serhiy Haidai, head of the Luhansk Region Military Administration, via Telegram. IAEA says Russian-occupied Ukrainian nuclear plant has restarted remote data transmission, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, said on Sunday that it is once again getting remote data transmission from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is currently in Russian-held territory. The transmission of vital safeguards data from the plant was cut on May 30 and restored on Sunday, the IAEA said. Amnesty accuses Russia of war crimes in Kharkiv. Amnesty International has accused Russia of war crimes during its efforts to capture the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. In a new 40-page report, Amnesty has documented the alleged use of cluster munitions and other indiscriminate means of attack. The United Nations Convention on Cluster Munitions, which came into force in 2010, bans the use of cluster munitions. Russia is not party to the treaty, neither is the United States. Ship carrying Ukrainian corn arrives at port in northwestern Spain, officials say. A ship carrying 18,000 tons of Ukrainian corn arrived early Monday at a port in northwestern Spain, using what a regional animal feed producers group described as a new maritime route that aims to avoid Russia's blockade of Ukraine's ports on the Black Sea. The cargo ship Alpula, carrying the corn, arrived at Spain's port of A Coruña before dawn on Monday and is due to be unloaded by Tuesday, the port's press office told CNN. Russia's war in Ukraine could push up to 49 million people into famine or famine-like conditions because of its devastating impact on global food supply and prices, and countries are scrambling to find a way around the blockade. On Sunday, a Ukrainian government official told Reuters Ukraine has identified alternate routes to export grain stores. French president has no fixed plans to visit Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron has no firm plans to make a wartime visit to Ukraine, the Élysée Palace said Monday. The president said he would visit Ukraine at the appropriate moment. Several options are being studied, nothing is fixed at this stage, the Élysée said. Unlike several European leaders, Macron hasn't visited Ukraine since the Russian invasion began on February 24. The French president, who is currently chairing the European Union Council, has repeatedly said that he will travel to Ukraine when it is useful. Macron visited Kyiv on February 8 as part of efforts to de-escalate tensions around Ukraine. EU Commission President in Ukraine, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen returned to Kyiv on Saturday to meet with Zelensky and discuss Ukraine's EU membership progress. As you know, the Commission is currently preparing the recommendations of so-called opinion for the EU member states, she said in Kyiv. We have been working day and night on this assessment and I promised to you in April, dear Volodymyr, that we will be tirelessly working on it. So, the discussions today will enable us to finalize our assessment by the end of next week. Ship carrying Ukrainian corn arrives at port in northwestern Spain, officials say. A ship carrying 18,000 tons of Ukrainian corn arrived early Monday at a port in northwestern Spain, using what a regional animal feed producers group described as a new maritime route that aims to avoid Russia's blockade of Ukraine's ports on the Black Sea. The cargo ship Alpula, carrying the corn, arrived at Spain's port of A Coruña before dawn on Monday and is due to be unloaded by Tuesday, the port's press office told CNN. It's the first shipment of Ukrainian grain to reach northwestern Spain by sea, using a new maritime route opened in the Baltic Sea to avoid the Russian Navy's blockade of Ukraine's ports on the Black Sea since the start of the war last February, the animal feed producers group, called AGAFAC, said in a statement. Some background: Russia's war in Ukraine could push up to 49 million people into famine or famine-like conditions because of its devastating impact on global food supply and prices, and countries are scrambling to find a way around the blockade. On Sunday, a Ukrainian government official told Reuters Ukraine has identified alternate routes to export grain stores. Deputy Foreign Minister and Chief Digital Transformation Officer Dmytro Senik said Ukraine was attempting to establish new routes with Romania, Poland and the Baltic states to allow 22 million tons of grain stuck in Ukraine's seaports to reach their destination. It's just a small amount of corn, but it recovers the possibility to import whatever's possible from Ukraine, AgriFac Director Bruno Bede told CNN by phone. He said AgriFac, the Galicia Regional Animal Feed Producers Group, typically imports 40% of its corn from Ukraine between January and June each year, which is part of the total 1 million tons of corn it imports for livestock feed annually. The AgriFac statement said that small quantities of corn have left western Ukraine in trucks for Poland and Romania, and that the corn which arrived in Spain was loaded onto a ship at Poland's Baltic seaport of Świnoujście. The Alpala is a Finnish-flagged cargo ship that was in Świnoujście in late May before making stops at 2 German ports and then arriving at a Coruña port on Monday, according to Vessel Finder. Bede said he didn't know if Ukrainian corn had arrived at any other Spanish ports since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in late February. Here's what happened over the weekend. The Luhansk region in eastern Ukraine, which makes up Donbas along with the neighboring Donetsk region, is at the epicenter of the invasion, with much of the area already under Russian control. The focus of the fighting is on the twin cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, where Russian forces have destroyed the second of 3 bridges between the cities and are heavily shelling the third, with the aim to completely cut off Severodonetsk, according to Serhiy Haidai, head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the fight may dictate the outcome of the war in the east of the country. Severodonetsk remains the epicenter of the confrontation in Donbas, Zelensky said earlier last week. Street fighting continued to rage over the weekend. The situation remains difficult. Fighting continues, but unfortunately, most of the city is under Russian control. Some positional battles are taking place in the streets, Haidai said. Here are 4 other developments from the weekend. EU Commission President in Ukraine, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen returned to Kyiv on Saturday to meet with Zelensky and discuss Ukraine's EU membership progress. As you know, the Commission is currently preparing the recommendations of so-called opinion for the EU member states, she said in Kyiv. We have been working day and night on this assessment, and I promised to you in April, dear Volodymyr, that we will be tirelessly working on it. So, the discussions today will enable us to finalize our assessment by the end of next week. Russia issues passports to occupied cities. Russia issued its first passports to 23 residents of the occupied city of Kherson in southern Ukraine a day ahead of Russia Day, Russian state news agency TASS reported Saturday, citing the Russian-appointed leader of the region. All our Kherson comrades want to get a Russian Federation passport and citizenship as soon as possible, Vladimir Saldo, head of Kherson Regional Military Civilian Administration, said at the ceremony, as quoted by TASS. An unspecified number of passports were also issued for the first time in the southern Ukrainian city of Melitopol, TASS reported, citing the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Civilian Administration. New grain routes established. Russia's war in Ukraine could push up to 49 million people into famine or famine-like conditions because of its devastating impact on global food supply and prices, and countries are scrambling to find a way around the blockade. On Sunday, a Ukrainian government official told Reuters Ukraine has identified alternate routes to export grain stores. Deputy Foreign Minister and Chief Digital Transformation Officer Dmitry Sinik said Ukraine was attempting to establish new routes with Romania, Poland and the Baltic states to allow 22 million tons of grain stuck in Ukraine's seaports to reach their destination. In Russia, Russians saw 15 McDonald's restaurants reopen on Sunday under new branding and ownership, according to its owner Alexander Nikolaevich Gover. The American fast food giant has been renamed Vkuzno Intikka, which translates to tasty and that's it. The chain decided to leave the country and sell its Russia business, in line with many other Western businesses following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which began in February.